hello.
Hey there. Welcome back.
Hey, man. There it is. We are here back with Mark chapter 3. Coming off of this Sunday, I felt pretty good. I felt pretty good about where we went, how we could take all of that. And this is good. This is the open feedback channel right now.
Yeah.
Micah would love for you to put in the comments all the things that I did wrong. No, but
let him know. Let him know. Is there a limit of space? No, just kidding.
That's exactly right. But yeah, we were talking right beforehand about just this chapter specifically, and I know I even broke the rule a little bit about I dipped back into chapter 2. So like,
as if your chapter didn't have enough.
That's right. Exactly.
I mean, honestly, I feel like we owe you an apology for giving you chapter 3.
Well,
you could make chapter 3 a couple months of sermons by itself. You've got, spiritual warfare, casting out demons, healing on the Sabbath, the whole passage of who's my family, what he's teaching about his purpose and the unpardonable sin, and you've got
him being a demon, apparently.
and you've got him picking the disciples, and this is an interesting spot where he picks the disciples because it also mentions the authority that he gives them over the kingdom of darkness in the same passage where they're questioning his power.
Yeah.
I mean, what a chapter.
Yeah. I mean, the implications of that specifically too, which we'll get into some like reflections where we were landing, the three of us, in this chapter. But that was something that stood out to me too. Now that you're mentioning it, of picking the disciples, of why Peter is recounting this, why is Mark writing down specifically in this order kind of thing of I'm giving you authority to cast out demons, and then accused of giving power of demons and of Satan. And so there's this tangent that could easily be taken of which direction is Jesus going? Is the kingdom of God here to harm me, or is it here to help me? And that's a little bit of the heart of where we were at this past Sunday of like, okay, if I'm met with this guy, I have to see, and we've seen over the last few chapters, because Mark 3 of some stuff I was reading was like signifying specifically Mark, like it's the end of his early ministry. So from here on out, we start getting into the quote unquote middle parts of his ministry. So it's like the solo show is kind of over. Now we're going into the group picture where we're bringing other people into this. And
I like the word you used about the 12 when you said it made you think of the remnant, how God's always got this small group somewhere that does powerful things. Isaiah was crying to the Lord like, I'm the last one on the earth. He's like, I got 7,000 you don't know. And then like Micah said when we were coming up here, how it connects to the 12 tribes and our Bible reading, those of us that are going through the Bible in a year.
Shout out Chad Bird.
Yeah. So I like the idea of how Mark put together that in this chapter, this irony of picking them and the authority mixed in with the chapter where they're questioning his authority.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think if we're going back to just like what were the things that stood out to each one of us, as I was getting into it, I think I spent a lot of time on the Sabbath stuff, and I was really interested in that because unlike other mentions around the Gospels of Sabbath, of actual, like, what does it mean to Sabbath? This wasn't in pertaining to rest. Like, yes, it had the elements of what are we doing on Sabbath? What's the real heart behind it? But this was way more of just the full legalism that the Pharisees, over the course of centuries leading up to this point with Jesus, it's like the Bible right? It's the Bible and interpretations. And even at some point of how, like, the Talmud, which is the collection of just rabbis' commentary. It's basically a big giant commentary of rabbis,
and it's
enormous, right? Yeah, I was almost thinking of, like, at some point, I feel like this could have been helpful. Like, hey, this is a way to understand it, but then, like anything we do, where we take something good, Satan wants to distort it, and something that's a helpful tool, like a commentary, ends up becoming like the thing.
I've got an interesting Sabbath story for you.
Yeah.
So I did a Sabbath dinner at a Reform rabbi's house in Israel.
Wow.
And he invited us all over. And I think there were like 30 of us in his house. He had these long tables set up, So we had just a beautiful meal. He and his wife, and they had a friend over to help, and they served a great meal. We had a great time. He was very gracious, and we also were very respectful. And when the meal was over, we all grabbed our plates, took them to the sink, scraped them off, and rinsed them and stuck them in the dishwasher. And then, had our pleasantries. And so I asked him, I don't in any way want to offend you. I'm just curious. And I said, how is this not a violation of work on the Sabbath for us to be, kind of clearing the table and scraping the dishes? And
sure.
And I said, I'm just curious. I promise I'm not trying to be rude. And he said, no, it's a good question. He had been raised in America. He was a Reform rabbi who moved back. And he said, our interpretation of the seventh day was rest. So for him, the real violation, or no, not rest, was creativity. God created for 6 and stopped. So he said, for us, any violation that is tied to creativity is the wrong. So he said, for example, we can put the dishes in the dishwasher, but we can't start it because of the creativity that was taken to make the dishwasher and all the intricacies of the dishwasher. We can't run it till tomorrow.
Yeah.
So for him, everything was tied to 6 days of creativity. So the idea of washing the plates wasn't really a violation to him because there was nothing creative about that. I just found that interpretation very interesting. And then you just think how different every rabbi could have taken all of these instructions.
Oh, sure. I mean, going back to like what really was Jesus trying to get at? And, with Sabbath, I go back to the workload of manna when God's providing manna, and collect for 6 days. On the 6th day, get a double portion because you're not going out to collect. And like the whole idea of the law when it comes around Sabbath of not going out, I think of it, I get the creativity side. I almost think of the other words like progressive, like trying to get ahead. Like, I'm not going to go store more manna up because I want to get ahead of everybody else. Or I'm going to go work the field on the Sabbath day so I can get ahead, and then I can go to the market and I can sell and get farther along. But like really having to like stop and be like, okay, do I trust the Lord that even in my absence of work, I'm still going to get taken care of and I'm still going to be provided for? And yeah, it's just like, okay. But yeah, what are your all's thoughts of chapter 3? What, as you guys were reading, as you guys were listening, what was coming to mind?
I like just like the right after the end of chapter 2, that Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. Just the immediate, like, goes in and he heals the guy's hand with the deformed hand. And I love that just immediate example, like further example of like, hey, like, I'm telling you, this is what I'm referring to. And just to, how he says, does the law permit good deeds on the Sabbath, or is it a day for doing evil? Is this a day to save life or to destroy it?
Yeah. I love when he says that. Love it.
And I love that indication. And he's like, it's almost like I've learned more and more about the Old Testament law is a revelation, like you talked about, as a revelation of who God is. It's not so much a like be stuck and be enslaved to the law, but this is a revelation of who I am. And basically almost saying, like, have you interpreted the law so poorly you totally missed the point of who I am?
Right.
Like, I want to save life. I love life. I value life. I've created you. I don't want to destroy it. I've given you the Sabbath as a gift. Yeah. This isn't something that you have to be holden to and that you are a slave to, but I wanted to give you this as a gift so that you can recognize more of who I am.
That's right.
And now you're abusing this when I am here and I've given this opportunity for this person to have this deformed hand, probably since birth, have this hand be restored. It's even further, it's Jesus showing this example of I have come to give broken life. I have come to give deformed life restoration. I've come to make the broken, the not right, whole and right. And, using the Sabbath as that tool to say, you've missed the revelation of who I am.
That's right.
This is a tool for you to use to understand more of who I am. And yes, it can be holy, and it can be sacred, but it can also be abused.
Yeah.
And it can be used as a tool for abuse.
I think. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say it real quick. The thought that comes back was when Jesus. Why did Jesus use that story of David? And the line that I was reading this past week was, the law was meant to be governed by love. And so you have the priest, and it didn't even touch the consecrated bread part, and you probably know about.
And David goes in,
yeah,
eats it.
That's a no-no. That's for the priests, and for the priests to just completely overwrite the law in that moment to give in need is exactly what Jesus No, it's supposed to be governed by law, or governed by love. And if the law will violate love, then you're totally already...
Because God is love.
Exactly.
But it also, as I read it, it also just brought me back to so much of our modern Christianity also, where we have we don't call it law, but we have taken...
Tradition.
Forms of Christianity have taken this religion and elevated it often over love. And, some churches will say, you can't come in because of, or you can't do this because of, and... I mean, it's
one of the things one of my friends said was if it's on Sabbath, or say you're in really deep prayer with the Lord, and your house starts burning, your whole family and your pets and everything. Where you're gonna be like, oh no, I'm praying, I'm with the Lord right now. I'm not gonna go work to rescue them. Really, I'm gonna prioritize my duties with the Lord over the act of love.
I'm old enough. I remember in this town when we had what was called blue laws, and stores couldn't be open on Sunday. It was illegal. I remember the store that fought it, as a matter of fact, out on Nixon Road. But restaurants and gas stations were open. And the whole idea is these stores couldn't be open because of people working on the Sabbath, which is, again, not Sunday. But it was funny to me that all of us Christians who were, for these stores being closed, or somewhere, I wasn't, but somewhere, had no problem with having a restaurant where they could be served food. And it just seemed, even as a child, it just seemed so ironic to me how we pick and choose. And I love that Jesus just says, look, what is the most important thing here?
Yeah.
It's that he brings this back to its caring for people. And then I jump forward to how much of our modern legalism, and by modern I mean the last 1,000 years, church history, but how it loses that idea of people are the most important. It starts to make the rule the most important,
or the service, or the times, or whatever.
Yes. Oh my gosh, churches have split over changing the time of services, color of padded pews. I know of a church that split because they were fighting over, can you go to your mailbox on Sunday and get your mail? Is that a violation of work? I mean,
wow.
It is absolutely crazy.
It's just the cycle. It keeps on going. At one point, it's
change the topic.
Picking grain or walking. Today, it's what clothes or what can you do on X amount of days. Yeah.
Well, think even communion. I mean, first off, 1 Corinthians 11 has been so misinterpreted of the unworthy manner. But other than that, there is no instruction of who can serve communion and who can take communion in the New Testament.
Yeah.
And, I mean, there are so many rules in churches. There are churches that won't serve it, even if you're in the same denomination, but come from a different church. Won't let you have it. It's it's unbelievable.
Getting to some of the things that we didn't get to cover, I thought one of these things was cool. In one of these little paragraphs, when people are just coming, I think I easily just skipped over it because it was just people were just coming from all over the place. They were wanting to get healed and things like that. And then Jesus quickly hushes a demon for not saying. We've seen this before, but some stood out to me when he was listing all the places from Judea and Jerusalem and Idumea and the regions across the Jordan and Tyre and Sidon. I mean, you're north, south, east, west, all this stuff, which I thought was really interesting because it's almost like a really cool foreshadow where at first right now, all these areas are coming inward to him. And very soon, it's going to be going outward. So I thought that was a really cool
point. I like that.
Interesting foreshadow of you see the lands are converging when they're about to just blow out and go completely outward, which I thought
experience Jesus and then change.
I thought it was interesting that the choosing of the 12 and he talks about them having spiritual authority. Because, elsewhere in the Gospels, when he sends them out, there comes a time where there's a kid with a demon they can't cast out, remember? Sick kid, and so the guy says, like, your disciples tried and it didn't work. He comes to Jesus, and so Jesus cast him out, and they're like, how was it? And he goes, this kind only comes out with prayer and fasting.
Yeah.
And we just left the chapter where he was saying, my guys don't have to fast because they're with the groom. You're like,
shoot,
okay,
yeah,
that's pretty wild. And so as I read that, both those thoughts were kind of converging in my head, and I was like, oh, man, what a wild thing.
That is true. And that's such a Jesus thing, too, because you're just like, how is that not just an overt contradiction where you have to sit with Jesus and you have to sit with the text and you have to sit with the Holy Spirit and just be like, what? And that was part of what I was trying to get at Sunday was like, Jesus gives us the Bible. Yeah. But he also gave us the Spirit.
Yeah.
To which he will go back to the Pharisees and the Sabbath thing and be like, hey, this is the law. The law is very good. It helps bring order. It helps bring like organization from chaos, which we see from Genesis 1, where he's like, all right, we're going to order the world. But then Jesus is also there to reveal the truth. And it's like, yes, it's good. The Bible brings order to our lives, but the Holy Spirit reveals it.
That's it. You got to have them both.
We have to have them both.
I like the comparison that you go back to creation. The world was in chaos until the Spirit, it says, was hovering over the darkness and the Word. So the Spirit and the Word come together, and then you get creation. Yeah. So we need, the first century church had an awful lot of Spirit because the Word wasn't written yet, and it was a special time in the church's history.
Yeah.
And I think the Spirit's still at work today,
Yeah.
But we have the benefit of more Word than they had. But you've got to have those together. And if you don't have the Spirit with the Word, I think that's how you end up in all these crazy traditions and legalism.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think you can maybe be void of the Word and be so Spirit that you might not know the groundings. You might be open to some things that aren't really of God. So, but you put them together. You've got the Word, and the Spirit helps reveal it to you, make it come alive in you and make sense. Man, then it's like creation. Boom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the Word with no Spirit is misinterpretations and legalism.
Yes, totally.
And same vice versa, right? Too much Spirit with no Word is just like madness.
Peter Lord said the absence of either one of those is like a one-winged bird, and all it can do is fly in a circle. So you got to have both sides.
You ever seen a one-winged bird?
I have not.
That would be a sight, wouldn't it?
It would be kind of fun to see a bird just fly in a circle.
Just kind of around.
Like,
let's hit on this which we didn't touch at all Sunday, where people are freaking out. We've seen the last two chapters of who's this guy who heals this man, who's the guy who heals leprosy, who's standing in the way of the law even, and then we get to a claim where I thought was a really cool kind of contrast where Jesus is like, I've already claimed I'm the Son of Man. And then you have the other contrast, which is, no, you're son of demons.
Yeah.
So what were your all's thoughts right off the bat, getting into that? Because I love how Mark really does. He categorizes this insanity side of what people are thinking.
He does.
His own family
That's
thinks
that's a great way to say it.
And then the people are like, surely you're of Satan. We're equating insanity from his family and demonic activity from the religious leaders, which I think is a really great way to just throw everything into a mess. Which
is interesting that you're talking about insanity, and then the first thing Jesus says is just purely logical. Well, how can Satan cast out Satan?
Yeah.
And he's just like, hey, I think about how he thinks about the Pharisees' thoughts with the man being lowered through. They don't say anything. He knows and hears their thoughts. So it's almost like whether he heard the verbiage of he's insane or crazy or whatever, or just knows that's what they think.
Yeah.
He's sitting there going, well,
wow.
If you think I'm crazy, well, how can Satan cast out Satan? Why would a kingdom divided is going to fall? So why would I divide my own kingdom? If I was of Satan or Beelzebub, if I was of the Prince of Darkness, how would I cast out what I want to continue?
Yeah.
So
how am I victorious if I'm a military force? How am I victorious when my men are fighting each other instead of fighting you?
That's right.
Yeah.
And but he's God. We shouldn't be surprised. But when I read his answers to the people trying to trap him, I'm like, this is incredible. His response to every objection is absolutely incredible. I mean, like on the Sabbath thing, think how many people would have cowered under the force of these Pharisees questioning you. And his thing is, so is it unlawful to help people on the Sabbath? Like, show me in the scripture where that's, and here he is, just so logically, like, how would a enemy be victorious by fighting themselves? And we have Old Testament references of that. Remember where God makes the enemies be confused and they fight themselves, and the Israelites just walk in and take all their stuff?
Oh my gosh, I was having a conversation with a friend, and this kind of goes into like a small psychological tangent, but when looking at like a trauma situation or an emotional situation or something that just completely dysregulates you, like just throws it away, like your brain works in kind of three big facets: logic, emotion, and survival. And so when something happens and you go into fight or flight, the very first thing that goes is logic. But you see, when you are safe and you are secure and you are just, everything's regulated, you're able to bring logic back. And I've always thought that's really random. But then looking at the scriptures of like the Pharisees right now, they're probably completely just like all over the place. They're just emotionally thinking, or they're thinking about, what does this do to my life? How does this affect me? They're just dysregulated at all, in fight or flight, just completely trying to find anything. And then you've got Jesus, which I think is just a testament to the Christian life and the power of the Holy Spirit, is you have these highly chaotic moments, and yet you see no logic of Jesus ever disrupted. Like, he's able to process,
Always
he's able
regulated.
to say whatever it is that's exactly needed to say, not in a manner that's like, oh, you're coming at me, I'm going to come at you, and my emotions are going to hide, or I'm all over the place. And it's just like, hey, have you ever thought about this?
Yeah.
I don't picture him as monotone, but I always picture him as just cool. Like,
Cool. Yeah.
I got this.
Oh, completely. And I thought it was fascinating.
I love how he just takes a little bit of jab at the enemy there. He's like, who is powerful enough to enter the house of a strong man and plunder his goods? Only someone even stronger.
Right.
He's like, someone that could just tie him up and plunder the house.
So note to self.
He's like, just keep
I
that in
just
mind.
took the enemy and plundered him.
For nothing.
Isn't in one of the Gospels, I don't know if it was this one, and doesn't in one of the Gospels he's like, the strong man, and I'm the strong man. Doesn't he make the claim that I'm the one who's
I don't
greater?
remember if he says that.
I don't know, but I'd like to think he did.
I mean, right here, he just kind of indirectly did.
Yeah, I mean, it's like pretty clear. Like the thought process I would have of his reasoning for saying it is like, let me make this as obvious as I can for you while giving you a little bit of a story. It's like, no one goes into a strong person's house unless they're stronger.
You're stronger.
Yeah.
And they know they are.
Absolutely.
And I just...
It's like playing
that.
King of the Hill as a kid.
Yeah, it's like he's like, no one's going to start a game that they know they're not going to win.
That's exactly right.
He's like, I'm going to win this one.
That's good. So looking forward into next week, we're going to see a lot of teachings. So Mark will throw in these, unlike Matthew, which is just heavy, like here's everything Jesus said. Next week, we hit a bunch of different parables. The classic one of the 4 different kinds of soil. We see the mustard seed. We're going to see a lot of like, what is Jesus really trying to get at, and why does he go about like talking in ways that are direct but also indirect? And I wanted to close with this thought of going back to this like insanity thing, where his family's like, you're crazy. We're kind of like, don't know what to do with you. Nobody really knows what to do with him. And we're going to start seeing how his disciples come along on the journey. And I was reading this past week which is so true, is that the majority of the disciples' role in the Gospel of Mark is negative. Like, it's not positive. They're always messing things up, not understanding, doubting, getting in the way of things. And I just thought that was such a fun encouragement for us.
Well,
it's like,
also, the thought on that is, again, most people think Mark is getting this from Peter. So, I mean, Peter has quite the resume.
Absolutely.
I mean, he's the only guy who ever walked on water. So, we might want to tease him because he looked away and he started sinking. maybe like, well, you didn't walk on water.
Yeah, it's like you didn't even get out of the boat.
So, and then the classic biggest blunder of them all, at the garden when he denies Christ. So how incredible, this life that Peter lived, that he's dictating this to.
That's right.
Mark, most likely, right? This is the most likely scenario for the Gospel of Mark that he got it from Peter. That Peter would highlight that contrast of this is how we all kept messing it up. Right. So to me it shows how that after Peter's restored, and I know he messed up in Galatians, but how there's still some humility in him through that whole process. And I think that is interesting how that kind of feeds into this gospel.
I love it. All right, well, we'll see you back here for Mark chapter 4. Micah.
You're loved. There's nothing you can do about it.
Have a great week.
See y'all.